Background to this is, well, we started, I think this was actually pre-lockdown, having a bit of a chat with Repair Cafe, originally with the idea of could Makespace be a place to host a super repair cafe, just because it's quite a convenient location for the center of town. It's got a load of things. And then it kind of evolved into, well, obviously lockdown happened as well, which kind of put that on the back burner. But it kind of evolved into some other discussions about, well, you know, given we've got a lot of equipment, could we actually help improve the likelihood that something could be repaired by using our equipment, or perhaps, and then it became actually a discussion about, well, are there any members who actually are into repairing and perhaps could help out? So maybe there's even some new repairers among us, or people who can help repair, which would be brilliant. And then finally, we've been thinking a little bit about, is there such a thing as a virtual repair cafe, or repairer training, or something that we can help with and things like that. But basically, this is an opportunity for Chris to give us a bit of a whistle-stop tour of what actually is Repair Cafe, how does it work, and how you should be thinking about it. And then for anyone from sort of the Makespace end, in the back of your mind, be thinking, how can we help these guys out? They're on a particularly excellent mission. And if there's way, either through our equipment or our people or anything like that, we can help them, or our facilities, that would be great to understand. And then with that, Chris, do you want to take it away? See if you can share your screen, and
okay,
let's hear what Repair Cafe is about.
Right. Well, I should say this is in the way of being a return match for the meeting we had last week, where we were treated to a guided tour of Makespace and saw all the wonderful machines that you had. We don't have any very substantial machines like that, nothing as impressive, but hopefully what we do is impressive in its own way. So the Repair Cafe ethos needs something to be said about it. This is not a rival for a commercial repair service. They have an important role to play. And so the Repair Cafe idea is very definitely to be doing repairs that you can't justify commercially. It's quite common for us to spend 20 or 30 minutes fixing some part that might only cost 20 or 30 pence to buy new. But it's all about making people aware that things can be repaired. It's trying to influence the key decision that happens when something goes wrong. Do I throw it away and buy a new one, or do I try and get it repaired? And making everybody realize that actually repair still is very definitely an option. It used to be part of our culture, but somehow it's got lost. And so we're trying to push back against that and make everyone think that of repair really first as the first option, and really only throw it away if you've run out of any other possible alternative. So there's no charge. It's a completely non-commercial thing. There is no commercial contract of any kind. But we say if people feel motivated to, they can make a donation. And actually, typically people are rather more generous with their donations than they would be if we'd quoted a price, which is nice. Anyway. Another key part of the Repair Cafe ethos is to involve the repairee, because very often repairs are really quite simple, and it's quite common for the repairee watching what you do to say, actually, I could have done that, couldn't I? And often people bring things in for repair because they lack the confidence to take things apart, and showing them that actually it's quite easy is a really useful thing to do, and makes it clear that if it ever happens again, then you'd be able to do it for yourself, wouldn't you? So we very strongly disapprove of anyone who brings something along and says, "Oh, I'm going shopping, I'll come back when it's done." The deal is that the repairee sits at the table with you, works through it with you, understands the reasoning that you're going through, also gives you permission to take it apart. You may find yourself saying, look, I've never done anything like this before. I may break it. Is that okay? And that's important that they understand that this is, it is what it is. It doesn't pretend to be a professional service. Critically, we don't claim to be experts, and we don't offer any kind of guarantee for what we do. It is what you see in front of you. One of the questions people often ask is, what about insurance and product liability and things like that? And I address that by saying, look, you know, if you took something to your neighbor and say, look, do you know anything about this? You'd take their advice for what it was worth. And you wouldn't dream of then suing your neighbor if it turned out that their advice wasn't really good. And I say, look, the repair cafes, all we're doing really is we're bringing neighbors together, people who have some knowledge of something and people who need some help with something. And so that pretty well, as long as you involve the repairee in the repair and you make all of that clear, then litigation is not an issue. I'm touching wood as I say this, but as far as I'm aware, repair cafes, some of them have insurance, but I'm not aware of any repair cafe that's ever had a claim against that insurance. And by and large, people are very, very understanding about that. So the Cambridge group of repair cafes, of which I think there are now something like 23, Nicole, something like that, benefit from having use of a very nice toolkit, which was originally donated by Draper Tools and Mackay's in Cambridge. And you can see some of it here. It does tend to grow a bit as we think of, oh, it'd be really nice to have something new. It's now several boxes totaling about 90 kilos. But the upshot of that is that if you need a tool, the chances are very good that it's there. The big box has the tools in. The small box has consumables, glue and nylon ties and self-adhesive tape and stuff like that. Also thermal fuses and a few electronic components that crop up again and again. We've built up the list of things to go in the toolkit over time, that is a list that I can share with anyone who's interested. There's just a new addition to the toolkit, which has taken it from 80 to 90 kilos. I'll just hold it up in front of the camera. This is an isolating variac, which is really, really handy for sorting out things like the motor in a vacuum cleaner, where you want to be able to run it slowly and you also want it to be isolated so that you're not going to electrocute yourself while you mess about with it. But it is another 10 kilos onto the load. So that's how we get to 90 kilos. I mean, I could give you a list of everything that's in it, but this would be rather tedious. So here's a list of verbs that we try and address, the kinds of things that you want to be able to do. There will be usually several things within the toolkit to do each of these things. It's available on loan to any Cambridge area repair cafe. They collect it from Mackay's during the week, use it over the weekend, and then take it back the following week. And every now and again, I intercept it and go through it and check that everything is there, fix a few things that are broken, top up the consumables and so on. But that only needs to happen about twice a year. So that's the toolkit, a great asset to the repair cafes. There is a challenge with putting everything back in the toolkit at the end of a repair cafe. It's a bit of 3D jigsaw puzzle. And anyone who's got any really clever ideas about how to do that and make that easier, I'd love to hear about it. We've tried various kinds of photo indexes and things, but it is a challenge. And at the end of a repair cafe, you think, goodness, did everything really come out of here? So the mix of products to repair, I thought you'd find it interesting to know the kinds of things we get involved with. This is obviously a fairly rough and ready categorization. For example, under electricals, the chances are very high that the problem in an electrical product is actually mechanical. But, you know, we just give these things loose categories. And I thought I would use this opportunity to get the various other repairers on this call to talk a little bit about the things that they specialize in. Everybody's got their favorite sector, I think. I'll talk a little bit about electricals on the next slide because I've broken that out with a bit more detail. Maybe, Gina, you'd like to say something about clothing and textiles?
Clothing and textiles. Normally, I take my little sewing machine, which is fairly basic, plus an ironing board. I've got a small lamp with a magnifier for detailed stuff. A lot of it is torn seams, where they've really outgrown it and it's sort of stretched, or it's been caught in a door handle or something. There's quite a lot of holes in trousers where people have been cycling, which are virtually impossible to repair. Stuff I take with me in the way of haberdashery, quite a lot of threads. I normally take about 60 different colours, all wound on bobbins, so I can just pop them in the machine or use them by hand, whichever. I've also got some embroidery thread. Things like elastic, buttons, poppers, hooks and eyes, patches are quite good to mend holes with. If somebody's bringing in knitwear, then I'll possibly take some wool as well. Fabric glue is quite useful. But normally we get a list of what's coming in, and then anything special, I'll try and put something in the in my box. The main problem is we get a lot of zips where people have broken the zip in different ways. Have managed to repair a couple of zips actually, which was quite surprising. I've got one or two, but it's difficult to take a range because there's so many different types, sizes, lengths, colors, and so on. I haven't found anything yet that I couldn't do on my machine. There are one or two things I could have done a bit better if I'd had things like an overlocker. But an overlocker takes 4 cones of thread at a time. And of course, there's the threading it up bit as well. And if we're on time limit, then it's difficult to do the fancy stuff. So things like soft toys are usually fairly well received when you can fix those, because they're usually well loved if they're going to bring in. So the oldest one I've had was just over 70. It was a wartime teddy bear, a big one, and it was stuffed with sawdust rather than normal stuffing. But she'd come down from Norwich because she'd heard about us, and she went home over the moon. It's lovely to see when things like that happen. So that's about it. I'll answer any specific questions, but that's more or less what I do. I'll tackle clothes, soft furnishings, toys, and anything really that's sewn.
Brilliant.
Right.
That's great. Thank you, Gina. Tremendous. I mean, I like clothing and textiles being included because we managed to maintain a 60% success rate, and clothing and textiles keeps that very high because Gina has an almost 100% success rate on her repairs. So that's brilliant. Thank you. Maybe Mark, you'd like to say something about mechanicals. Mark, I should say, is an absolute genius when it comes to sewing machines, but he also does all kinds of other things. Like to tell about some of your achievements, Mark?
I'll tell you about some failures as well as some achievements, if that seems appropriate. One of the things that comes in for mechanical, which is a sort of an orphan category bit of things that don't look as if they're electrical or electronic faults, but may well have electrical bits in them. You get toys, which vary from the fixable to the completely, totally unfixable. I quite like it when people bring along clocks. Clocks varying from the present day, and people bring in quartz mechanical clocks, to which the usual advice is, if it's broken, buy a new movement for 99p. And so, and if you've already got one, I can fit it for you in 20 minutes. Through to quite a lot of mechanical clocks of the sort of 20 to 200 years old range. The really ancient ones, I have to say, this is not a place for it to do serious restoration of an antique, or this looks like something where you don't want an amateur meddling with it, take it to a professional, through to the stuff which is a mere 100 years old, which I'm much more confident with because it's not quite as valuable. And clocks are very satisfying. One of my first repairs ever was somebody brought in a striking clock, a sort of mantelpiece size clock, and said, it stopped going bong on the hours, it just goes clunk. And we set it out on the repairer's table and I showed them how to open the back. And within a second, I could see why it was going clunk instead of bong. And within about 10 seconds, I'd explained what was wrong, which was that there was a big blob of grease over its coiled up spiral spring bell, and wiped it away. And we checked it and it went bong again. And they were absolutely delighted. And the repair took well under 10 minutes, including explaining about it. The critical thing with all such repairs has always been, and the great thing about having the repairee helping and talking to you, is you ask the history, you find out how it got to be in the state it's in, rather than it's not working, can you make it go, which is what you would probably do if you dropped something off to a professional. But you can ask them, was it going and went twang and stopped working, or was it you thought going and you put it away in the shed for 25 years and you just got it out and it doesn't work, or what was the real story? And then sometimes they tell us. Another category I'm quite often brought, and again there's a very high success rate, is people bring things along that are supposed to be sharp and are not sharp, such as their garden shears or secateurs or kitchen knives. And it's usually very straightforward. It's just a matter of explaining why you have to get the right angle for whatever sort of edge it is, and showing people and sometimes getting people to finish the job for themselves of sharpening things. And they go away again, they go away very, very pleased that they now have, instead of throwing away their garden cutter, they can now use it again for another year. And they realize that that's what they're supposed to do after that if something stops working, this is how you can keep it going again. I get brought things which are pottery and sometimes glassware, which is broken to glue together, and they vary from the quite straightforward. You just need to know know and show how to get the broken surfaces clean, and how to put a drop of super glue on safely without gluing your fingers or your eyelids together. And sometimes it's a pain because you can almost do it. The challenge I find with repair cafes is that they are, it's important to evaluate at a fairly early stage whether something is going to be doable before the next person with an appointment comes along in 40 minutes time, or for some repair cafes 30 minutes time, which really means you have to be fairly confident you can get it fixed in 20 minutes or 30 minutes with somebody helping. That being the way around it works when somebody's helping. It's very frustrating if something that you thought was going to work just runs over. The most annoying I've had to remember of those was somebody brought along a vacuum cleaner, which would probably come into Chris's category of electricals. And after 40 minutes, I'd got most of it taken apart, but not enough to get at the motor, which was almost certain, and the vacuum unit, which was almost certainly the cause of the problem, because its fault was just that it wasn't sucking nearly as well as it should have been when it was new. And so after 40 minutes and annoying the people who were on next, I'd spend the next 10 minutes putting it back together and saying, I'm really sorry, but it's not going to be practical at a repair cafe. It would have been much better to have said that at the beginning. The other electrical category I get brought, sorry, Chris, I'm treading on your toes, is toasters. And I hate toasters. Toasters are horrible to fix. They're always full of smelly old toast and congealed bits of of other things that weren't toast that have gone into them at some stage. They've nearly always got a burnt out element, and in about half the cases of a burnt out element, the way toasters are cheaply made, that burns out the board of the electronics timer as well, and they are effectively unrepairable. And even when they're not, unless they're made by Dualite, they're hardly worth the trouble of taking apart, because they take so long to take apart and you can't get spares when they do. The exception, the shining exception is so somebody brings in a Dualite toaster, because they take 5 minutes to take apart, 1 minute to change the broken bit, and 5 minutes to put back together again. The disadvantage is the broken bit costs as much as anyone else's new toaster. And the other category is sewing machines. I think Chris likes it when people bring me sewing machines, because like sewing, they usually work when I finished with them, and they usually fit in the time space. At a repair cafe, I think my oldest sewing machine was only a little over 100 years old, which is not doing badly, because the oldest sewing machines in the world are about 170 years old, and there are not very many of those around, and they're in museums. The oldest I've worked on, I've actually belongs to one of our other repairers. Hi, Helena, and we've dated it as 1889, and it's going to take a certain amount of work. The distinctive thing about sewing machines is that they're much easier to work on and repair and show people and teach people about if you're sitting beside the repairee rather than the other side of the table, which is our usual way of doing it. So normally we have a wobbly, springy, nasty village hall fetched out table with a chair on one side for the repairer, and an extension lead leading to a socket so you can plug in tools and gadgets that you're fixing. And on the other side, a chair for the repairee. If it's a sewing machine, I usually pick up my chair and carry it round. We both sit on the customer's side, because it's much easier to point to something and say, that's the bit you need to adjust for this, if they are seeing the same thing that I'm seeing. And again, the story with sewing machines, the critical thing is usually to ask them, is this a sewing machine that, or ask them the story, get them to tell it, get the repairee to tell me why the sewing machine has arrived at the repair cafe. Again, sometimes it's that somebody has just bought a sewing machine on eBay, and it was sold as fully working, but of course it isn't. That's the usual state for sewing machines bought on eBay. If you don't know what you're doing, don't buy a sewing machine there. Through to, it was working this morning and it stopped working, and I don't know why. That was a fellow repairer who is not in this call, I guarantee to you, so I can say that, and I shan't name her, but she'd, in a moment of absent-mindedness, put the needle in back to front. Once we worked that out, off it went. And the older ones, the oldest sewing machines often need a minor adjustment and a lot of oil, and new ones tend to need correction of their owner's misunderstanding of the instructions, or a bit of cleaning, unwrapping threads from places. My specialist sewing machine kit I have brought with me. I don't know if I can show it to you. I shall try. There is really not very much in it. The most critical bit is an old lump of scrap iron. You will recognise what it is. It's a bit of a bicycle headset. The critical thing about that is the right weight, and for setting the tension.
Could you put it up a bit higher, Mark? Because we can't quite see it.
Is that better?
A bit higher. Oh, there you go. Right. Okay. Thank you.
Because I can't see what I'm doing.
Right.
Its sole job is to be a 22-gram weight. With a 22-gram weight, I can set the correct tension on the bobbin thread of a sewing machine, and I can show how to do it, which means that the next person, the owner, should their shuttle or bobbin case go out of adjustment again, they know what to do, because they can set it for themselves. The second most critical bit is, can you see my held up object?
Box of matches.
It's a box of needles.
Box of needles. There you go.
And probably look again. Can you all see it?
Oh yes, yeah. There you go.
It had 100 in it when it was new, and it cost me £15. And again, very many sewing machines. A very common mistake is people who assume their sewing machine will go forever. With how much managed to change this back to me, or did it? Or
You
did I
have.
not
You're back
touch
to
it?
you.
Great.
Yes. Yeah.
We'll run forever, and they don't realise that the needle point wears into the wrong shape, especially if they do things like sewing into the teeth of the zips, or across buttons, and a needle with a dinged end does not sew nearly so well. It tears the cloth instead of sewing it. And again, taking out a needle and putting in a new one fixes a surprisingly large number of sewing machines. A bit of adjustment, but I was holding up the whole of the extra toolkit for fixing sewing machines, on top of the usual handful of mechanical things like a screwdriver and a pair of pliers, and a multimeter to make sure that the plug connects through to the motor. Pretty much covers it.
Right.
I guess worth saying, I bring my own tools for most fixing, because it takes too long to find the right thing for commonly used stuff in the huge Mackay's stored.
Yes, that's a common complaint.
Toolkit. I will look in there for specialist things, but for what I expect to use, I'll bring my own because it fits in one bag.
Right.
I think that's probably all I needed to say, unless Chris wants to prod me into anything different.
No, that's brilliant, Mark. I ought to have looked at my statistics, because I know that you're top repairer on the statistics chart, the league table of repairers. But anyway, thank you very much. I won't say much about tablets and phones and computers. They tend to be difficult to do anything with unless you've got more time than we have in a repair cafe. And typically you end up saying, okay, you've got a broken screen, you need to go away and get a new screen and bring it back, and then we may swap it in the next repair cafe. But these very high-tech things are really difficult to work with. Phones that, like iPhones that have loose power connectors, really difficult to do. We do have the kit to do it, but the surface mount workstation is really hard to use. Anyway, would Helena like to say a little bit about doing something with jewellery?
Yes, thank you, Chris. Well, I make jewellery, but I am not a jeweller. So I think it's quite important to know that I don't do things like gem setting in a classic sense of being a jeweller. But I make jewellery, I string beads, I do wire work, I make some of my own components, and that has turned out to, and also, just to show off, I have some very little tiny dainty tools, which is there aren't those sort of things. And a lot of jewelry repairs just need tiny tools to get in and do the fiddly things, but also to understand the mechanical way that jewelry components work. And so I think I probably have a reasonably high success rate, because often it's just a case of reshaping something or putting in a new component. So I come with a bag of boxes of lots and lots of tiny little components in silver and copper and whatever.
They call them findings, don't they, or something like that?
They are technically called findings. I have a huge selection of findings, and I bring lots of different threading materials, because more often than not somebody brings you in a bag of beads, stretchy things, because a lot of bracelets are literally on elastic and it gives out, and all you have to do is rethread it, tie a knot, glue it, and tell them to cut the spare ends off the next morning. So it's pretty straightforward, and because I have lots of fiddly little tools that get into nooks and crannies, I have been known to do the odd toy and things like that as well. And I've always got super glue. lots and lots of glue. But I think possibly one of the things that I decided to buy for myself and always bring with me is a little ultrasonic cleaner, because people's jewelry is filthy. It's really, really filthy. And you can pop it into that, because there's always the kitchen, because hopefully there's somebody making tea and cake. 8 minutes in the ultrasonic cleaner does a world of good to lots of people's jewelry. And then it's actually nicer to work on. So yeah, I'll have a go at most things, but I think one of the things that I discovered last week was that, and I've known it for a long time, I need to learn to silver solder, because there are certain things that could be repaired if you could put a blob of solder in them. Things like snake chains. People bring snake chains and they are impossible for me to repair. They're also quite cheap to buy, so I tell people to go and buy a new one. But and I think one of the most useful things is, with our bookings, knowing what people are bringing and what they think is wrong, because you can have a really good idea of what you're going to do. And quite a lot of jewellery repairs are really quick. So I often manage to fit in quite a few dropper inners. So that's it. But
Great.
I think one of the most important things is that one of the things we do is give advice. You can always say, well, this is a job for a professional jeweler, and send them to various places. So,
I mean, a lot of people in the repairing profession, they make it look really complicated so they can charge you lots of money. I think we have completely the opposite approach, where we show people really there isn't a great deal to this, and you could do it yourself.
could have done it for eyebrow tweezers. Is the sort of thing I say to people. You know, they just pull a ring out of shape, and it needs reshaping around something like a fine crochet hook or something. It's doable.
Yeah, indeed. Thank you very much, Lena. I won't talk much about bicycles. Bicycles do come along to repair cafes. There are, of course, lots and lots of bicycle repair shops in Cambridge. And bicycles also tend to be a bit messy. But we do some, and we have a tarpaulin that you can lay out. And one or two people who specialize in bikes bring along a stand to put bikes on to work on. But it's not mainstream. Furniture, likewise, isn't mainstream. One of the challenges with a repair cafe is that gluing things takes time. Furniture often suffers from the fact that you can't glue it and leave it to set. And that can be an issue. And then, of course, there's a whole load of other things which come along as one-offs. Mark mentioned clocks. One of my favorite repairs was a lady who brought in a cuckoo clock and said she suspected that a member of the family had sabotaged it, and could I make it work again? I did, but I'm not sure the family thanked me. Anyway, the mix of electricals, these are broken out by the various different categories of electrical appliances that come along. Lots and lots of audio. Audio stuff is typically older than high-tech things, and a lot of that is getting to the point where it really needs attention. I think one of the things I most hate doing with audio is ghetto blasters, where it's quite common to spend all of 40 minutes trying to get the two halves of the case apart, just to change something trivial inside. Kitchen appliances, very common. Somebody brought in a food mixer and admitted they'd been using it to knead clay, and therefore it needed a bit of attention. Lots of other household items. Lamps are very, very common. And we've had a rash of people bringing in lamps that have touch-on, touch-off electronic switching. And when you put an incandescent light bulb in and the light bulb blows, it overloads the triac in the switch. And yes, touch-on, touch-off lamps are very nice, but a toggle switch is an awful lot simpler and easier to replace. Power tools come in typically with mechanical wear, broken gears and that sort of thing, or full of sawdust or whatever. Beauty products, quite common. Hair straighteners and hair curlers hair dryers and epilators and all that sort of thing. Steady stream of those. Video, surprisingly less so. We expected a load of VHS recorders and things like that, but mostly those have been pensioned off now. Typically, it's DVD players that come in now, and not a lot you can do with those. A few office products, things like shredders and so on, and a few toys as well, electrical toys. And this was from a sample of 460 something of these. One of the things which I for a period of 3 years, I collected stats. I've kind of given up on it now because it was going to be jolly hard work, but we collected stats for the first 1,000 repairs that we did in the Cambridge area. And interestingly, we came up with this graph of the probability of fixing things versus age. And I was pleasantly surprised to find that the shape of the graph didn't actually change much over time. And I'm not quite sure what you make of this. The way I think it's happening, although we need to prove this, is that the stuff that's 2, 3, 4 years old is typically not well made, or it's been abused, or they misunderstood how to use it. Very, very largely things with surface mount electronics in, which are really, really difficult to repair. And I'm afraid that I think that that the 2, 3, 4 year bars on this chart are a matter of some disgrace for the electronics industry. When you get to sort of 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12, up to 30 years old, then things are more repairable. Pin-through hole electronic components are much easier to deal with. It does fall off slightly towards 30 years because it gets harder to find spares, and there's less and less support for the older bits of electronics. But once you get beyond 30 years, the products typically aren't electronic or even electrical. And then the probability of fixing things is very, very good indeed. And that to me is an irony, that the older things are, the more likely it is that you can repair them. And I think it really is something that we really all ought to be questioning, where the direction in which manufacturing is going. That the very new products are very, very unrepairable. So I'd like to think that the repair cafes are exerting a little bit of pressure on the manufacturers to change this. Another way of presenting the same data is in a sort of naming and shaming table, and we had a bit of fun putting this together. These are just the commonest manufacturers. One or two surprises, but not surprising to find Apple down in the bottom left-hand corner. Pleasantly surprising to find Panasonic and John Lewis and Roberts up in the top right corner. I don't know what you make of it that Kenwood kitchen appliances are not very repairable, but they're also jolly old before they bring them in. Yes, this is a slightly enigmatic table. You can make of it what you will, really. But it's certainly something that well, people like Dyson and HP and Brown really ought to be looking at their reputation, given that this is people's experience with their products. Anyway, that's something about repair cafes. Hopefully, it's given the Makespace members on this call a feel for where we're at, the kind of things that we do and how we do them, and the way it works. So I thought it would be important to talk a little bit about the potential synergies between us. As Simon has said, the idea of hosting a city centre repair cafe at Makespace sounds wonderful to me. I think that would be a really good thing to do. It would also bring people into Makespace who haven't seen it before, may not even be aware of its existence, and be a really good marketing thing for Makespace, as well as being a very, very central location for us and having some excellent facilities. So that would be brilliant. I really hope that when we come out of lockdown, we can make that happen. Simon has agreed to set up a video studio, and we would love to come and make how to repair YouTube videos and show people how to do things, and show them that things really aren't as impossible to repair as people often think. One of the most obvious things for Makespace to do is to make replacement spare parts. I've got a little widget here that I need a replacement made for. I've already talked to Simon about this. It's for my Morris Traveller. It's no longer made, and it's small and easy to make, and that would be fantastic. Lots and lots of plastic parts get broken, and the idea of being able to make a new one by bringing in the bits and replicating on a 3D printer sounds fantastic to me. We find it very difficult to do anything with metal parts apart from at the sort of jewelry scale, like Helena said, and being able to mill or turn a new part or fold a bit of metal sheet would be wonderful. It's something we can't really do at all at the moment. Also, of course, we're very constrained in that we can't do anything in a repair cafe that requires a tool that's too heavy or too immovable. And the church halls that we often run our repair cafes in aren't at all happy with the idea of us doing welding or anything like that. Certainly nothing really with heat apart from a hot air gun. So the idea of being able to use some of your less portable, oh yes, and as Mark says, yes, cups of tea as well. So yes, that's definitely an exciting opportunity. And finally, and not least, we'd be really happy to welcome any Makespace members as repairers. You'll find it's a very rewarding way to spend a couple of hours on a Saturday or Sunday. When you bring somebody's whatever back from the dead, they think you're absolutely wonderful. And that's very satisfying. Yeah, I think the repairers get quite as much out of it as the repairees, and certainly the repairers come back again and again. And I can highly commend that to you as a very rewarding thing to do. And also, of course, you get to take apart a lot of things that you've perhaps never had a chance to look inside before, see how things work. Learn what the current practice is in terms of designing the interior of products. I learned about new electronic components and new mechanical ways of doing things from taking apart domestic appliances, and it keeps me current. And it will keep you current too, and maybe give you ideas for new ways of implementing things in the projects that you're doing. Ideas for repurposing and extending existing products. Things like taking the stepping motors out of a defunct printer and using them for wonderful robots and things like that, and all kinds of clever things which will stimulate to new ideas just by taking apart things which are already being manufactured. So I hope that excites you to join the Repair Cafe movement and come along. Very little commitment required beyond a couple of hours at a weekend. Enjoy using all the tools in our toolkit. Enjoy making somebody's day, taking their cherished heirloom and making it functional again. So that's really all I had to say. Hope that interests you. And of course, we'd be delighted to take any questions that you have.
Well,
yeah, let's do that.
For a long time, because as far as I had understood before today, most repair cafes that I have heard about would only take repairers if they're actually professionals in that trade, rather than just random people.
Okay, well, we're very willing to welcome anybody. I think that the key thing about qualifying as a repairer is to know what it is that you don't know. To know at what point you need to go and ask somebody else for some advice. And I think if someone comes along who has a good understanding of that, then that is the main qualification. If they're unsure, then we have run a very successful scheme of mentoring where we say, come along, sit with an experienced repairer for one repair cafe, and get a feel for it, and get some understanding of what's involved, and also find out what you do know and what you don't know and what you need to ask somebody else for. We're very, very keen that repairers should ask other repairers for advice. And that has been extremely beneficial, and most repairers have learned some handy trick from somebody else.
And the other thing that I'm wondering, and that question only popped up during this talk actually, is why there are such harsh time limits imposed on things that one, even from the description of the repairee, could say ahead of time, that'll take a couple of hours. Is there no flexibility there to say, okay, it looks like a task that is so interesting.
Chris, can I come in on that, please?
Yeah,
Chris?
do Kate, yeah.
Yeah. Oh, hi. I help organise repair cafes in Cambridge, in the area, and take part in the booking process. And if something comes in that's going to obviously take a long time, we do allow more time. I think you need to understand that each individual repair cafe has its own procedure, and the more experienced organisers would do that. They would allow more time for things that are obviously going to take a very long time to do. But we do want to get as many repairs through as possible because we want to help people get their items repaired so they're not going into waste. So we do have this time limit. We find 40 minutes works quite well. And we do have, if we have a big repair cafe, we do have, we factor in repairers who are not booked to do anything at all, and they will pick up perhaps the bigger repairs and people who come in who haven't booked. Does that answer your question?
Yes, and shows that there is the level of flexibility that sometimes is necessary.
Yeah,
As my
yeah, we do try and be flexible. Yeah,
my level is high tech, so these things sometimes take 40 minutes to open the case.
I think also we feel a certain responsibility not to leave the repairee with a bag of bits. And if you know, after 40 minutes you've got everything laid out on the table, and there's a reasonable chance of somebody being able to repair it, then we feel honor bound to put it all back together again, and that often can constitute a significant overrun. Yes,
Can
I make a point? From the organisational point of view, we are a sort of South Cambridge village here, and what we find is
you're very muffled there.
it's very what we've got a list of repairers we know. They've put on a list on a spreadsheet. We've got their particular skills, and we do advertise a cafe well in advance, so people who want to book can actually send in an email request with what the product is, what information they give about it, and
Sorry, you're inaudible.
We can't hear you, I'm afraid.
very hard to understand what you're saying.
Sorry, we couldn't catch that.
Right. I'm in a quiet room. Must be a fault with my laptop. And
No, it's good now. Try again.
I'll turn the speaker volume down. Yes, I was saying how you administer it is important. We're at the South Cambridge, a group of villages. Am I coming through all right?
Yes.
Yep.
Yes. We've got a regular, but when we decide on a cafe date, we've got a regular band of repairers we know. We've already got tabulated a list of the things, the specialities they think they've got. And by advertising in advance, if they want the book, can actually say what they've got, what they think's wrong with it, and as much detail as possible. So it's either can be, the organizer can either direct it to a repairer before the event, or repairers can jump in and say, I'll go for that one. So that list is what we have at the door when people come in. And then for the jobs that overrun, well, we know other people will finish jobs early, and if they're in the right skill set, we can divert customers to them. So one way or another, we manage to cope with all the people who've booked, even though they don't necessarily see the people we thought they would in the first place. But I think a good administrator at the start or beforehand is quite an important part of the process. And by being local and having repeat cafes, we get to know our customers, they get to know us, our repairers
Yeah.
get to see people, and apart from anything else, it's a great social event. It's nice to be people you know or people you've met months before with a different problem, and one way or another, it's thoroughly enjoyable for everybody. Hope that
Thank
helps.
you. Yes, thank you. Anyone else with anything?
I ask a question or suggestions. The motivation for me to attend this call is one, because I just joined the Makerspace and I was excited to learn about the Repair Cafe. And two, I'm leading the Green Impact team at Institute of Manufacturing at the University of Cambridge. And as you can imagine from the title, it's a bunch of engineers, and there are like engineers and technicians and who's willing to do our own repair cafe. And we do have some sort of facilities like 3D printers and laser cutters and all sorts of like workshop, like the big machineries. And this year, I was thinking to propose that to host a repair cafe, and which will allow people to bring or send, because of this COVID restriction, their stuff, and also in parallel training our engineers who has some understanding but who willing to learn more about it. So one question, will that be possible to host the Repair Cafe at our premise so that it will be still open to anyone, but also open to the community at the IFM?
It sounds a great idea. We have run into a bit of difficulty with the university being overly concerned with product liability and corporate liability for the university. But yeah, if we can crack those issues, then yes, it would be brilliant. And I have attended a few meetings at the Institute for Manufacturing to talk about this, but it was a couple of years ago. Yes, we're certainly very interested. But I mean, maybe Nicole could talk about the difficulties we had at the engineering department.
Right. Okay. Yeah. I talked with the admin staff at the building, but she preliminarily was very supportive in the Repair Cafe idea. And when I spoke to the technicians in downstairs, and they were happy to provide their skills too. So we made a team up together to make it exciting. But the other question was, I myself was banned from going to work in the last 7 months, and I don't really expect that I'll be welcomed back to the building anytime soon.
Oh.
Yeah, so in this case, I was wondering if we could do any like a remote repairing service, this because it's one of the struggles that I have as a screen team leader, because we don't go to the building. Like there's so little activities we could do together. So Repair Cafe could be remote or online, or could we host something like that?
Yeah, I mean, maybe Nicole, you'd like to respond to that. We have tried virtual repair cafes, but it's not been without its challenges.
Yeah, okay, but it's possible.
It's possible if you want to try and do it. I think there have been different virtual repair cafes sprung up quite quickly to kind of meet the need when the pandemic started. I think we've all found that they've not been as popular as we thought. So the people that have come along have really got a lot out of it. And they've enjoyed the experience and they've learned a lot, but the repair rate, you know, has been quite low because a lot of things do require like torque screwdrivers and quite complex equipment that most people don't have in their home. Yeah. So after 7 sessions, we did actually stop doing it and decided to move more towards Skillshare and things like that. So that's what we've found, but I'm not saying it's impossible that you could make it work. Maybe within a certain group of people that maybe know each other, but the appeal for the public wasn't as huge as we'd hoped.
Okay.
And as to venues where we've run repair cafes, so the first time we did one with Cambridge University, they didn't allow any electricals because they were very nervous about it. But at the second one, they did allow electricals, so it ran as quite a normal repair cafe. We've run them at Kesseljar Gallery. We run them in town council buildings. We run them in the lobby of the Arts Picture House. So yeah, we can run them all sorts of places. We run them at Cambridge University Press. Yeah.
Okay, so thank you for the hopeful notes. Perhaps we could design, I could propose some type of series of activities relating to the Repair Cafe, like starting from the virtual training, and as time goes by, if the restriction is lifted, then maybe if we have more freedom, then we could host one physical and a proper one sometime next year. Maybe we could
be in touch. We'd be certainly interested in doing one at IFM. That'd be great. We do. Yeah.
Yeah, and IFM are quite a big Makespace supporter as well, so they do pay a lot of attention to what we do here. So I think if we do make it a success in something like the Makespace environment, they will actually be a lot more comfortable to some degree, because they understand how we operate.
Yeah.
Then obviously don't operate the same way, but they do understand how we operate, so that can be a help. Yeah.
Well, what was said here just now raised another question for me about equipment, non-transportable equipment, like Makespace has, other sorts of non-transportable equipment that may repairers may have at their homes. What is the basic rules and legalities of taking a reparee's object home in order to be able to effect a repair with a newly made part, then again in the reparee's presence, because sometimes you have to take something home to make the copy.
I think what we say is that that there is no obligation on a repairer to do that, and in general it's discouraged. But if a repairer feels strongly that the repairee is deserving of it and worth spending time on, and the repairee is suitably appreciative and understands the limitations of the service being offered, and isn't like to come back with any question of product liability or anything like that, then the repairer is allowed to take things home, but it's entirely their call whether they want to take that responsibility on or not. Would you agree with that, Nicole?
Yeah, I mean, John Mallins, do you want to say a little bit about some of the software repairs and how they might take a bit longer and how you can access people's computers and stuff?
Yes.
John?
Yeah, sorry, yeah, I was just unmuting myself. Yeah. Yeah, on software, obviously it can be quite difficult, especially if the person's using the computer they want fixing, to have the Zoom call with you as well, which is what happened to me last time. Remote, again, if people will trust me, then I can remote log into their machine and then effect some repairs if at all possible. And occasionally I have taken stuff home and worked on it from home and then delivered it back to the repairee as well. I've done the same with mechanical and electronic items as well. So because I work mainly in the Royston Repair Cafe, and quite often we end up taking people's kit home because often there's insufficient time to really fix it there and then. So, but again, as Chris says, it's always done with close cooperation from the repairee. They understand there's no guarantees. They're not going to hold us liable for anything, and we do our best to do a good job.
It's good to hear that there are no hard and fast rules about that. I'm really getting quite to the point where I would tend to join up. As I said, I have just such a lot of things that I can see that have been mentioned here. Things that I've never thought people would take to a repair cafe. Actually, I hadn't thought they'd bring in like a washing machine. They actually do that. Anyway, so at that point, I have a lot of things at home, lathes, mills, laser cutters and things, 3D printers, and sometimes 3D printing a part from resin, for instance, can take 4 hours. This is wall clock time. It doesn't cost me anything really, but it's just time that I can't have the repairee waiting there, sitting there while the printer chugs along. You see what I'm saying? So that's good news for me.
So one thing for any of the sort of Makespace people on the call that came out of our previous discussion, which I thought was interesting, was that often the Repair Cafe meeting is quite a lot to do with the diagnosis. And then it might be about sending that person away because they're not retaining the thing to be fixed. They're sending that person away and say, you need to go and purchase this part, turn up at the next cafe. Now, maybe there's something where we can help, where actually it's, you know, you're going to have to come back to the next cafe, but actually perhaps someone can help fashion this part because it's not available or it's extortionately expensive. I think for the sentimental things, it's probably just that it's not available. So I think that, from what I understand from the Repair Cafe, the way it operates quite successfully, you know, it's not necessarily about holding it over the time. It's about sending someone away and they come back if they care. And if in the meantime a part could be fashioned or they could work with someone, that could be really interesting. So I do think, you know, one thing to be considering is if anyone's interested in this, Nicole and Chris were highlighting that they have this sort of understudy model where, you know, obviously not at the moment, but unfortunate, but where you could go and perhaps sort of tag along with a repairer and just get an idea of the culture and the kind of things that happen. Yeah, like you were saying, Melanie, that the type of things that turn up, it's quite shocking. It's not what I would have naturally imagined.
I think, yeah, going back to what you can actually bring along, Melanie, I think we say, if you can carry it, you can bring it.
Yeah.
And then sometimes people put stuff on a trolley and they might bring in the washing machine, but if they can get it in, then we'll have a go.
So each repairer's space is actually big enough to like work around the washing machine, pop them off the side panels and things, and it's wow. Oh, by the way, is that a solid ink Xerox printer behind you?
Oh, it is, yes.
I use one to do direct to metal prints of PCBs.
Yeah, we could go into all sorts of things about that. But did you realise it costs you £11 every time you turn it on?
Yes, that's why it's never turned off.
But I was going to say about taking things home, it does actually work the other way as well. Before I started the Cottenham Repair Cafe, people from the village used to keep turning up at my house saying, do you know anything about this? And now I can say, yes, why don't you bring it along to the next Repair Cafe happening in a month's time?
Okay, well, that may help you to better organize your time in dealing with your neighbors' requests right here.
Indeed.
Nobody knows that I have a Makespace in my garage, which I do. The only thing I'm missing is the big metal mill and the metal lathe.
Wow. I'm impressed.
So Chris, I think that was a great summary. We'll see if there's any more questions in a minute. But I think one of the sort of calls to action for anyone on the call is if you've kind of got a sense now probably of the sort of things that happen at Repair Cafe, and you can probably imagine, well, you probably can't imagine, but you can start to imagine some of the problems these repairers come up against. And I think it'd be really interesting if anyone who's joined the call is interested in sort of being that second, being involved in being that second line for repair, where we could start exploring, are there new repairs that currently are written off that armed with, as Chris was saying, a 3D printer or some metal, some metal turning or, reflow oven or whatever it is, things that happen to be around Makespace or that our kind of members have. I think we'd really like to allow the repairers to explore with you, what could be done. So maybe afterwards we'll try and collect some names if anyone is interested, and just start a discussion to see the sort of things that might be enabled that otherwise aren't possible at the moment. Some of that might be logistics, have logistics implications, but have a think if you're interested in doing that. I'll perhaps send out an email and we can just collate a few names so that Chris and co can start chatting to you. And then the other thing I think is, we
mentioned to Simon, I've got a little widget that I need a replacement for. They aren't made anymore, and it can be made in plastic. I'm looking for a volunteer.
Yeah,
I need a mirror image of this one.
This is a perfect example of taking something as a bit of an experiment and seeing if it could be done, because normally this would be written off by a repairer. And yeah, in times when these cafes are running again, I think it would also be interesting if you could make yourself known if you'd be interested in joining the cafe as an understudy, just to sit alongside one of the existing repairers to kind of see how it works. I think Chris and Nicole have highlighted they'd be really happy to support that if you're interested.
Parts no longer being made is actually a major issue that I'm running into. Like I have a 2005 Chrysler and had a broken gear in the airbox, which of all places is particularly hard to get to. And I've actually took up my SolidWorks and remodeled that gear, printed it in resin, and it worked like for 3 months. Today it failed, but by now the replacement from America from another Chrysler user breaking his car up had arrived. So I wasn't stuck without heat in the winter and not stuck without cold in the summer, as that was the driver's side blend door that wasn't working. So yes, parts not being made anymore becomes a major issue, which is why I've actually started amassing this massive remanufacturing capability I have here now. I just don't want to throw things away. I've always hated that.
Well, so Chris, should we wrap things up to allow people who want to leave now? We've been on just over an hour. Thanks, Chris, for doing the talk. Anyone who wants to stay on, I'm sure Chris and Nicole and others will hang around for a little bit longer. But don't feel embarrassed now if you if you feel you want to leave. But if you have other questions and things like that, just hang on, and I'm sure we'll carry on chatting for a little bit. But,
Simon, if people want to get in touch, Simon, I'm going to put my email down there. Kate, shall I put Cambridge Repair Cafe as well?
That's fine. Yeah, do.
Okay, I'll just put that into the chat if people want to get in touch.
Yeah, so anyone who's got some questions, I know Kira, you, for example, you had some specific questions. Yeah, if Nicole, you put the email there.
And if anyone comes up with any ideas in the meantime, after they sign off, those contact details will be really useful.
Okay. Yeah, thanks, Chris, for taking the time to go through that. That was
Yeah, I mean, these meetings are all about maintaining the momentum and the goodwill that's built up in Makespace and repair cafes and keeping it going through lockdown.
Yes, I had been wondering outside of lockdown how actually repair cafes have been operating in a COVID-safe manner.
You haven't, no, we haven't.
So has anyone else got any questions for Chris? It's quite a privilege to have him on the line. So has anyone else got any questions you'd like to ask Chris or Nicole about how the Nicole and Kate about how the cafes are organised?
Hi, good evening. Yeah, I've got a quick question actually. How does it work in how you distribute work? I mean, do you have a system where you get people say, I've got a clock that needs repairing, I've got this, that and the other, and then you call in the experts who know how to do those sorts of things? Or is it that you have a certain amount of people who are going to allocate their time to a day and you get the repairs to fit the expertise that's in the shop that day?
Do you want to go, Nicole, or do you want me to go on that one?
Okay, you go.
I think each local repair cafe has its own system, but the one that Nicole and I and Chris tend to use when we're doing one, like a city centre one, is that when we know it's coming up, and we might have a 3-month lead-in time for that, we line up the repairers who are going to be there. So, and we get that set up before we advertise the event itself, so that when people start booking their items in, and we have various ways of doing that. Online form is the easiest. We know what skills are available, so we can say to the person booking their vacuum cleaner, and yes, we have someone who knows how to do that, might be able to help.
And we forgot to mention the database of repairers that we have.
Yeah. And if you're organising a repair cafe, you would have access to our list, our Skillshare. What do we call it? No, repair skills, isn't it? List of repair skills, like a register of skills. So people who want to repair, and we've sort of okayed them, if you like, through our buddying system, they can sign up to the skills register. So when they are then booked to go to a repair cafe, or they agree to go as repairers to a repair cafe, the organizer, who often isn't a repairer, it's someone like me who doesn't know one end of a screwdriver from another, can actually match the items that are coming in to the repairers that are available. So it's not hard and fast. So if an electrical item is coming in, if I've got, say, Chris, David and Umesh, for example, I will know that I can give it to any one of them and they'll be able to probably sort it out. So it's a certain amount of fluidity, but you have to be prepared to see for what's coming in. And the repairers themselves most of them like to know what's coming in, so they know which tools to bring. They can perhaps look up the model number beforehand and find out what the particular faults are, so they're well prepared. But all that does depend on which particular repair cafe it is, and individual organisers tend to do their own thing to a certain extent, which is part of the good thing about it, I think, really.
One of the challenges we have at repair cafes is that it's common for the Wi-Fi in the venues to be dreadful or non-existent. And that is a limitation on looking stuff up.
They're getting better. They're getting better, Chris. I think the Wi-Fi.
Did I hear this right? That people have to book in their stuff 3 months in advance?
No. The organisation, the event itself could take a 12-week, I would say. Nicole, 12 weeks, 10 weeks?
Yeah, for a big one where you're going to see 80, 90 items, yeah.
Yeah. I mean, we tend to run the bigger ones in Cambridge. The village ones are much more sedate affairs, if you like, and have fewer people and maybe a bit less frenetic. If you're running a big event with something like 80, 90 items, and that's not unusual, you do need to be fairly organised. So you need to get your venue booked, your repairers lined up with a few spares in case people are ill or can't make it or whatever. And then you can start advertising the event. Then you can start booking stuff in. And some people do book in as much as 3 months in advance. But most people, it would be in the last 2 or 3 weeks. But by the time we go there on the day, we know what's coming in, and we know who's going to be there. And we've allowed for people who will bring stuff in that isn't booked. So we've got a few spare repairers lined up with spare time who can take those on.
You know, I think I had a much more romantic vision of people just turning up.
Oh, sometimes the ones that Nicole and I run aren't
mine I run about 50% walk-ins, but it's a much smaller one than Kate's and Nicole's, and it takes a lot less organising.
But some of the smaller village ones are just walk-in ones sometimes. Yeah, you don't have to book it. It's just we found that because we were spending on the venue, particularly, we didn't want to be in a situation where you ran an event, you paid for the venue, you ran an event and nobody turned up, or the possibly worst case scenario is you run an event, you've got 2 repairers and 100 items turn up. So we were trying to sort of maximise maximise the sort of potential there.
I'm actually in a management role, so I should have thought about it, wearing that hat, but I never did.
I'd say that if you come and join us as repairers as part of the Cambridgeshire Repair Cafe Network, you'll be part of a world record beating team. So we ran the world's biggest ever repair cafe here, and we held the world record for about 2.5 years. So
hang on, Nicole.
We're not doing it again.
You said held. Does that mean you no longer hold it?
Yeah, well, Devon and kind of have beat us, but they didn't do it the same way.
We need to help you again, I think.
It was stressful. I don't want to do it again. I'm the gauntlet has been passed.
So is there anyone else perhaps who hasn't had a chance to ask a question, got something they'd like to ask?
I think what we'd say normally at this point is come along to our next repair cafe and see it work. But of course we can't do that at the moment, but that is what we would normally do.
Well, yeah, but when our repair cafe is actually going to resume? Only when there's a vaccine?
How long is a piece of string? We don't know when it's going to be COVID safe, do we? So unfortunately, we can't give you an answer on that.
Is it going to be only when there's a vaccine? Or what is the criterion? I know you have no timeline, but what's the criterion? What's actually the driver behind the decision to suspend and the driver that would be for the decision to reopen?
I don't think anyone wants to be in a position where they run an event which is not COVID secure and somebody becomes ill for whatever reason, or gets COVID and then traces it to one of our events. I mean, that'd be something I would be extremely uncomfortable with, and therefore take the line of you know, being as careful as possible. And I think we also have to remember that many of our repairees and repairers are of retirement age or thereabouts, and we are you know, more at risk than young people. So I do think we have to be extremely careful. I think it'd be irresponsible personally to do anything else, but that's a personal thing for me.
Well, I've got to say that I'm basically at the moment behaving almost as if I was shielding.
I think some of our repairers will be as well, yeah.
I do have a couple of comorbidities that with COVID could be difficult. So the only thing I do is go out to the supermarket like 2 times a week.
I think, you know, I'm optimistic, particularly with the news last night, and this vaccine thing is just one candidate. There are other things coming up. I'm optimistic that by next year sometime we will be back.
Okay.
So it's definitely something we'd like to use this gap to see if there's anything that you know, the groups of people can work out together that might be useful when these things are up and running. Because
I think it's a good opportunity to use the time in that way. Yeah, I agree.
Yeah, and maybe also for the virtual trainings as well. Yeah, has anyone anyone perhaps who would be interested in helping a repairer?
Well, I'm wondering at this point.
Melanie, is it right if we let anyone else speak, just in case there's some other people on the call?
I could probably help Alina with the silver soldering and glass work.
Oh wow, that'd be amazing.
I've done it for years, but I'm not professional. I'm a dabbler.
Yeah,
I've been doing it for 15 years. I'm still learning.
Dabbling for 15 years sounds pretty qualified to me.
Yeah, much like me. But
yeah,
it's
like you, I've done all the beads and stuff.
There's so many types of jewelry making you can do, and I just haven't got around to silversmithing yet. And you can't do everything, but it is I know a gap in my skill set.
It's good to have a dabble. You know, I do a little bit of enameling, precious metal clay, beaded jewelry, bits of earrings from little bits of plastic off the laser cutter.
Yeah,
bits of junk. I pick it up and make some.
And it is genuine gemstones, sterling silver, nothing less than that.
Yeah, I've done that, but my eyes are not as good as they used to be.
Polymer clays and things like that, because there's too many things that you could do. So I kind of found my niche. But as I say, I need to be able to silver solder at some point in my life.
It sounds like we may have found someone to.
Yeah, I think Andy was offering to help you learn or do it.
Yeah, I mean, anyone else in the jewelry area?
Cafe and sit along a Helena, and then you know, with his soldering iron.
Yeah. So when Helena was talking about jewelry, did anyone else think that this is something that they have some skills that they could use?
I'd like to learn the silver solder as well, but
yeah, it can do that.
I've sorted so many things, none of them silver.
So Andy, I think you're getting quite a lot of interest in silver soldering, so that's very good. What about the fabrics? So Gina, you were talking about fabrics and things like that. Have we got anyone on the call who's dabbled in sewing repairs and things like that?
I don't know.
Anybody wants to learn?
Anyone that wants to learn, yeah, that's true.
I used to make corsets professionally.
Oh, right.
Which is a quite difficult thing to do, as you have to sew right next to the busk while the busk is in. So yeah, you just break your needles all the time, like.
Yeah, I've made wedding dresses, which is basically you make the corset and then you make the dress to go on top. So I've done things like that. But yes, it would be great to work with somebody else who can do pattern cutting and make them fit that well as fit in a corset. Yeah. So we could work together.
Potentially. I've got a few things up my sleeve, especially a spreadsheet that is my own proprietary work from all the clients' averages that I have sampled for basically taking nothing more than the 3 standard measurements and throwing out what roughly could be a corset's pattern.
Yeah,
I think you also said that you had an industrial sewing machine, didn't you, Simon? That you can do canvas and leather and stuff with.
Yeah, we have a leather sewing machine and also an overlocker. So again, this might be a case of. So I think what we'll do is after the call we'll put something out, and now people understand what you're about. So you gave a great. I'm sure there's lots of questions as well, but I think you gave a great overview of kind of what you get up to, and I probably opened people's eyes to the kind of things that turn up. So that was superb. So thank you for doing that. We'll share the emails addresses that Nicole shared in the chat.
I've already had an email from the Institute for Manufacturing. It's already come through.
Excellent. Yeah, there you go. So we'll share that and see where the interest is and try and try and direct those people to you. And also maybe if we'll share your challenge of your the part. Right. And see if we can use that as an experiment to what it would be like to have some of the skills at Makespace back up some of the repairs. I think that would be brilliant.
I haven't even really seen what the part is.
Yeah, but that's part of the processes we've got to work out, right? So Chris, it's on the hour. Thank you very much for spending the time. I think a lot of people were turned up as well, which was brilliant to see. So hopefully people have learned a lot. And yeah, I'm sure we'll be following up with you. And you were talking about renting village halls and things like that. So yeah, we will definitely host you for free in Makespace whenever you want to do a big super repair cafe when times are more appropriate. Yeah. Okay, thanks everyone for turning up. I hope that was interesting. Thanks again, Chris, for that talk.
Thanks, Simon.
Yeah, let's follow up afterwards. Have a good evening, everyone.
Thanks very much.
Bye.
Thank you.
Bye.